1, 2. All right. Good evening and good night, and welcome to the It's Your Perspective Talk Show. It is Monday, March 7th, 2016. My name is David, a.k.a. Kimber, a.k.a. Christian, alongside
Bingy Soup.
Yeah, Soup. We're back. We're doing a special show on Monday. As everybody knows, our normal days are Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. But we like to say some Mondays, some Fridays, even some Saturdays, even some Sundays. But today's Monday. We're doing a special show tonight. Just want to say that this is the It's Your Perspective Talk Show every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, weekly 8 p.m. until. We do have a telephone number, 340-201-9005. You can also text us on a number as well. But most importantly, we have a website. Go to our website, streaminglivefromthevi.com. Go to our website right now, and you'll be able to see the show tonight. Click on the tab that says Watch Us Live. We also have email, streaminglivefromthevi@yahoo.com. For our guest tonight, we are in the high-tech, low-tech studio, coming to you from an undisclosed location here, St. Croix, Virgin Islands. No radio, no TV, internet only, which means you have to get your iPhone, your Android, your tablet, your iPad, your Mac, or your Windows PC. Open up your browser, Safari, Firefox, Internet Explorer, and type in streaminglivefromthevi.com, and you'll be able to see the show tonight. All our shows are on YouTube and Ustream.tv. Search for our channel, It's Your Perspective Talk Show. We have 2 Facebook pages. Definitely want to give a mad shout out to the CHS class of 1982. That's the year that Soup and I are representing. And most importantly, we want to give a shout out to all our past guests. Thanks for being on our show. So we got close to 300 shows on our channel. Check them all out, going back to April of 2014. We're on Twitter as well. Tweet with us there. Moving straight forward and up. The show's mission is just to inform, entertain, and empower everyone. And Soup, you ready?
Yes, I.
Yeah, man. So Soup's been blessing us with some positive vibrations as we continue on here. Soup, you ready?
Yeah, I ain't hearing nothing now.
Just go ahead.
Yes, I. Greetings to one and all. Hope everybody had a wonderful and blessed day. Rastafari lives. I'm going to read a speech from His Majesty. Why education? From truth alone is born liberty, and only uneducated people can consider itself as really free and master of its fate. It is only with uneducated people that representative and democratic organs of the government can exercise the influence on the national progress. However, our programs undertaken in the economic field of augmenting the material welfare of our subjects has not made us forget that, according to the words of the Bible, man does not live by bread alone. We believe that the spiritual and moral welfare of our people is as important as material well-being. Thus, it is that following the liberation of Ethiopia from the yoke of the enemy, we have devoted a large part of our budget and national revenues for the establishment and development of schools. During this short period of 10 years, no less than 15 secondary schools, of which the last, the General Wingate School, was opened by ourselves this year. We have been established directly as a result of our initiative and direction. The number of students enrolled in the schools in Ethiopia has nearly tripled during that same period. Shortly, the university, the foundation alone, the foundation stone of which we have laid, will be open under our direction. We face with confidence the future of public instruction in Ethiopia. If we have made so many sacrifices for the education of our youth, it is because we are convinced that only through intellectual progress and universal education can Ethiopia come to its own and make its just contribution to the history of the peoples of the Middle East. We believe that from truth alone is born liberty, and that only an educated people can consider itself as really free and master of its fate. It is only with an educated people that representative and democratic organs of government can exercise the influence for national progress. Our addresses from the throne, therefore, testifies to the importance which we attach to education, and at the same time to your role as representatives in the development and the progress of our people. November 3rd, 1951. His Majesty only took one function in his government, and that was the Minister of Education, because he was dedicated to education. Without education, we'll be lost. Without a tree without its roots. Give thanks to one another.
All right. So we're back. Here we are. Our guest tonight is Opal Palmer Odisa. There she is. Wave to the crowd. Your viewers, family, and friends are seeing you right now. So welcome. How you doing?
I'm doing well, and I'm very happy to be here on the eve of International Women's Day,
Yes.
which is really why I'm here to talk about that and to talk about myself and some of the projects that I'm doing. But really to give a shout out to women internationally. It has not been, it's the first time Women International Day was celebrated was 1911. And that was done in Denmark and Sweden, Switzerland and a couple other places. And it only became a national event, if you might, in the USA, starting in 1975. So it's still a relatively new event, but it's an important event because it started with women working to get for the vote, working to have fair and decent condition in terms of employment, working to have a voice. And that struggle still continues because there are still many places in the world where women don't have a voice. It's really quite alarming when you look at some of the places where women still don't have to vote. But I want to focus, if I might, more specifically in terms of the Caribbean and Caribbean women. And in terms of certainly African Caribbean women who were brought to the Americas as enslaved people and who therefore didn't have much choice about education. And the excerpt that Soup read earlier is about education, and education is still fundamental and important. Because regardless of what you have, if you're not educated, then you could lose it. And if you're educated, someone cannot take that from you. And you can begin to expand your mind and your knowledge about yourself. And I think that's really important that we as a people, particular people of the Caribbean, particular people of African descent, where much of our history has been kept from us and we have not necessarily gone to investigate it as well as we should. We need to look at how does that influence and impact who we are. I want to start with this poem, which is a relatively old poem, old meaning it's in my collection, which came out in, and I don't remember, 208. So for me, that's old. And it's called I Name Me Name. And this is important for me. This collection was very important for me in terms of just looking at my lineage, the people who have influenced me, looking at my roots, Jamaica, the Caribbean, and naming myself, because I just had my DNA test done to confirm. I wanted to confirm that I was from Africa. I knew that, but I wanted to confirm exactly the lineage, and so have got that from Guinea and other places in West Africa. So this poem is about I Name Me Name, and it's for the women, and it's for Caribbean people, and it's for us to really search out and know our names, and not just in terms of whether it's Opal or Jamara or any of those other names. The poem speaks to knowing who you are, naming yourself, and not having other people outside name you. Some call me Black, Gal, Sapphire, but I call myself I Name Me Name. Me, this ebony child woman, I am not someone's mistake, a relic from history. I name me name. It's a lie they've been trying to shove down my throat. It's a lie they've been trying to make me accept. I name me name. My ancestors were not merely slaves. My history is much older than 400 years. Feel my breath. Cobwebs float from where I extend back. Clay and wood become dust, swirl into the day when touched. I name me name. Before Europeans landed on my ancestors' shores, cities fed and clothed people, armies built fortresses. I am not a carbon copy of my oppressor. I will not file my nails, accept second-class citizenship. I name me name. And so for me, naming myself, knowing who I am, honoring my roots, both my maternal and my paternal roots, honoring my country roots, my island roots, my Caribbean roots, my African roots is very important to me. So as I come on the eve of International Women's History Month, day, what I think about, well, what does that mean for me? Well, for me, it means a lot, because less than 200 years ago, really, my ancestors weren't allowed to be educated. And so we were denied education. We didn't even own our bodies. I could be raped. My children could be sold away from me. That was the experience of women in the Caribbean as enslaved women. So when I stand before you as a, in quotes, free woman, where I own my own body, I own my children, although one doesn't really own one's children. But in other words, when they were young, someone couldn't thrust them from my arms and sell them to someone or someplace that I didn't know. So standing here on this eve of International Women's Day, I feel very proud of the legacy of my ancestor. I feel very proud of the struggle we have forged that allows me to sit here or stand here or speak to you guys as a woman from the Caribbean who knows my name, who knows my history, who knows my lineage, and who have fought and continue to fight and will continue to fight until my last breath for equality of women and equality of all people. And so that's very important for me, that you understand that it was not some frivolous fight that this day represents. It represents something very real for women, and it still represents something very real for women, because I've traveled to a lot of East and West Africa, and I've traveled to other places, and a lot of women still do not enjoy the freedom that I enjoy. And many women in the world, regardless of where we have, don't have the freedom to just walk about on the streets, because rape is still an epidemic in many societies, including this one. So for me, International Women's Day means that my daughters and my future grandchildren and all women will have freedom, and that many of these social ills that exist today that curtail a woman's movement and limit what a woman can or cannot do will be eradicated, because what that eradication will do, it will free both women as well as men. So I give big up, enough respect to women internationally, and I'm very grateful and honored that this day is celebrated for women to acknowledge the path that we have traveled and the path that we still have to travel, because even in the United States, that has been celebrating International Women's Day since 1975, women are still paid less than men, and black women are even paid less than white women and white men. So you see that the disparity and the discrimination still exists, and there's much that has to be done.
Opal, how can we now, 2016, change this whole view from the world of thinking of woman as a lesser being, and to know that she is most responsible, just like the man too?
Right. Well, I think it really begins with a one-on-one, and which is why for me it's important to be here, because I think a lot of these young girls don't necessarily know that history or that struggle, and I think that sometimes they adapt behavior that I don't necessarily think are womanly, because they think it's hip, because they think it's cool, and that I don't necessarily think that they honor the woman in their lives. So one of the first ways to honor the woman in your lives, who I am, is a direct reflection of my mother. Yes, I had a father and he had influence, but my mother stood her ground and she served as an example for me. I mean, a simple thing like I was telling someone that I never, and my mother is still alive and 87, I never heard my mother curse. She never cursed at me. She never cursed at anyone. And so that was the standard she set for me. And so I think what needs to happen is that we each need to look at what is the standard that women have set, or that needs to be reset for women, so that women honor themselves, young girls honor themselves, honor their bodies, honor who they are, value their education. And whenever they see young men or anybody else disrespecting them, demonstrate in such a way so so that they are honored. And I think we start by honoring the women in our community who have paved the way, who have done amazing things in the community, and saying, it's important that we honor them. It's important that we understand what they had to go through in order to stand up for themselves and for the community.
Is the Virgin Islands doing anything for this particular day? Any ceremonies, speeches, activities?
I am not aware of any, but it doesn't mean that individuals or organizations aren't doing that. I know that a lot of times certain companies will honor the women who work there by either giving them flowers or providing a luncheon for them. I imagine that something like that might be happening. I hope something like that will be happening. But it is an important question that you raise, because then what it says to us and what we can begin to say to the community and to the politicians, that we should put a policy in place so that women are honored on this day, tomorrow, March 8th, and that perhaps this should be a yearly thing that the government does, and there is some public ceremony honoring women who have shown community service and other leadership roles in the community. Certainly one of the ways that everyone can do it is by just honoring your mother tomorrow.
Yes.
Calling your mother, offering her some help, a small gesture, whatever. Honoring teachers, many of whom are women, although we also have male teachers. Yes.
Okay, so International Women's Day is tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Is it? I think part of it too is when I read this is donating. I guess donating money.
Well, there are various organizations that collect money, and there are many women that are in situations where they need help. For instance, one of the successful global markets that have been happening in Africa and in India is where women are loaned a small sum of money to start a little business, and that has proved to be enormously successful, because not only are they feeding themselves and their children, but they're really revitalizing the community. So there are various organizations to do that. But I would like us as Caribbean people to think of what is the most appropriate way to honor women, which that it might be gifting money, but it might be something else as well. And so for us to begin to think more in terms of who are we as a people, who are we as a society, and how do we honor our own.
Opal, do you see us in the Caribbean treat our women different from, let's say, the mainland or Africa, since you travel the world?
Mm-hmm.
Could you give us a reference to that?
So here's one of the things for me is about safety. And one of the things that is important to me when I travel, when I was in Egypt, when I'm in most of Europe, that I can walk the streets late at night and not worry about being raped. It doesn't mean that those things don't happen there, but the incident of rape and violent crimes against women were small, so that you could feel safe walking. And I love to walk, and as a child, a whole group of us in our community used to go to walk, even in the evenings, and it's something that I wouldn't do on my own. And so that says a lot about our society. I would like to feel safe to walk at night by my own and not feel that I'll be attacked or I'll be raped. And I'd like that to be the same reality for my daughters and for my daughters' daughters and for every woman or every daughter. So it seemed like a very basic thing, but yet it is not present. Most women will say to you, even here in the Virgin Islands, that they don't necessarily feel safe on the streets by themselves late at night. And maybe this is also true for men, so, I don't want to necessarily say that.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So coming from your early beginnings in Jamaica, was there International Women's Day being kind of celebrated there too?
No, there wasn't. I must, it was really first celebrated in the West, meaning North America, in 1975. And so there wasn't that kind of celebration that we know it has now. So when I was growing up, there wasn't a celebration for women. But in a way, women were celebrated because they were so much a big part of the society and the community and things they're doing. I think we have to really think about what it means for us. How do we honor women? How do we celebrate what they do and give praise to them in a way that's community based and in a way that nurtures and foster positive movement in the community in terms of going forward? I also think, your question about are women celebrated in a different way? I think yes, in some ways, yes. Certainly I think in Africa, women, particularly older women, are revered and honored, and people would protect them. When I was growing up as a child in Jamaica, this was also true in Jamaica. Women were not necessarily victims as they are now, and particularly older women or pregnant women. The community, including all of the men, honored and respected them, and then something very negative has happened. So now there is not that respect and honor that I think when I was growing up as a child, that was certainly there for women. And that has shifted drastically. And I think there are many factors that has to contribute to it. I think many of the young girls and young women are not necessarily being given the guidance that they should. And so their behavior and their talk, and I might be old-fashioned here, is not necessarily womanly as far as I'm concerned, and so I think a lot of things have shifted, and we need to begin to see how do we want to reshift things.
Well, for me too, it's kind of I don't know what the word to use, because I had an incident where where my mother was attacked, and they tried to harm her too. So I definitely understand where you're coming from, that the woman them has to be protected, especially our younger women and our elderly ladies here. In general, and to see a society has come from a point of honoring the elderlies to now attacking them, it makes us wonder what took place, So
yeah, it really speaks to lack of development, although some people will call it development and progress, but it really speaks to how we've lost touch with some basic human values, some basic things that are important to us, and that were important to us, and that were fundamental to our culture and way we lived. And somehow we've lost that in our zest, I guess, to be modern and metropolitan and all of these other things. I want to read a poem unless there's another question.
No.
This is called Not on Our Backs, and it's for Barbara Christian, who is actually from St. Thomas. And I wrote this poem actually several years ago, more than several years ago, to honor Women's International Day, and I think it still speaks to that. No, you cannot stand on my back, not hers either, nor that sister's over there. Our backs are not for rent anymore, not for the men in our lives, not even for our children. So no, goddammit, you cannot stand, lean, and don't even think about using our backs as a stepladder. We are not your strength. We are our own strength. We do not want to keep playing Harriet or Sojourner or Ida or Fanny or even Bessie or Lady Day or Dorothy. They did it for us. No, goddammit, you cannot stand on my back. Not my sisters, nor my mothers, not my cousins, or even the whore on the corner. You cannot stand on any of our backs, not anymore. We take charge of our own strength. We relinquish high blood pressure. We abandon obesity and breast cancer. We throw off madness and chewing on our own tongues until we choke. We are tired. Are you deaf? These are words spoken with love. I will not go to any more posthumous celebration to honor black women who have worked themselves to death, left as they were alone to hold back the river, to set off the explosive and take the heat. No, step back, get off our backs. We black women have had enough. We are saving our energies and using our commitment towards our own salvation. Don't admire or look to us for strength. Go unearth your own. Don't applaud us for being so capable when you didn't even bother to show up at the negotiation table. Don't thank us when you fail to speak up in our defense or lend your support. No more. We black women are not going to give our lives for you anymore. We have learned to love ourselves and we are not choosing death. We have decided on life, long and sun-filled. We are speaking up for ourselves and we will speak on your behalf too, but only if we are assured we can count on you. Too many strong black women have died way too young from cancer, from heartbreak, from diabetes, from stress, from lack of love, from obesity, from disappointment, from the glass ceiling, from being overworked, from taking on everyone's load, from volunteering too much, from being the one to organize the protest meeting, from not being able to say no, from giving too much of themselves without receiving anything in return. From carrying Sojourners and Harriet and Idas and Fanny's and Bessie and Lady's Days and Dorothy's burden. No, God damn it, you cannot stand on my back. Too many of my sisters have paid with their lives. No, you cannot stand on my back, not hers either, nor that sister's over there. Our backs are not for rent anymore.
That was deep.
Thank you.
Deep.
That was real deep. So let me ask you, Opal. So when we met a couple weeks ago, I think if I'm not mistaken, you said that you are a master poet.
Yes.
Can you explain a little bit about master? And I guess there's a
Well, it means I've been doing it for a long time. It also means that I've taught for a long time. I've taught both. I've taught at every level, from elementary through college. I've also taught at prisons. When I was working in California, I taught at San Quentin. In fact, I stopped teaching at San Quentin when I was very pregnant with my second child, my son, because the day I went there, we were almost on lockdown, and my husband said, no more. He said, I don't want you to have the baby in San Quentin. And I've taught in women's prison. I've taught at juvenile programs. I've taught in a wide spectrum, not just in the university or on the high school level. And I've given workshops in many different places throughout the USA, as well as in Germany, in Egypt, in East and West Africa, in many different venues. So I guess that's the title that one earns after having done that for 20 plus years or more.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you say you say you're teaching, is it poetry or you're teaching just like other subjects?
No, when I was teaching in the university level, I taught other subjects, but I specifically taught poetry and creative writing,
Okay.
but primarily poetry in prison systems, in school systems, in community settings. I did a work for welfare program that I designed in California, and I taught poetry to women to get them as a way of processing their feelings. Many of them had been incarcerated, so it was a way of getting them to process their lives, to look at their lives. And I found that poetry really helps people to examine their lives and to look at the decisions that they've made and to make some other decisions. So yes, for me, poetry is the means through which self-expression and internal looking occurs best.
Okay.
So basically, you teach them how to bring it out.
I teach them how to bring it out because, of course, it's already in them.
Right.
And so what I do is through some guided exercises, through bringing samples of poems from different writers,
Right.
I help them to tap into themselves and figure out what are their own words. How do their own experiences relate to the model poems that I might be giving them, so that they can write their own stories. So a class that I developed and I've taught on the college level and in the community level for probably about 15 years is called Life Stories, and I go through a series of classes each session,
Right.
and allow women as well as men to explore their lives from their childhood, to look at certain patterns and to see how those patterns have impacted their life both positively as well as negatively, and to look at what they can change.
So how did you get into poetry? I mean, early on. I mean, what brought that about?
I don't know if I know what brought that about. Let me just say this. In the school curriculum, when I was growing up in Jamaica, poetry was a big part of it, and I
Okay.
always excelled. We had to memorize a poem, and then it was much later that we had to write poems. And so I had my first poem published at 13 because the teacher gave an assignment about the sounds I like to hear, and from way back then the beach was one of the sounds, going to the ocean, the
Yes.
beach on Sundays. And anyway, she selected my poem and it got published. That didn't necessarily make me think I was a poet. I didn't even know what a poet was, I don't think, at that time. But I always remember myself as a child being able to express what I was feeling through poetry. And I didn't necessarily share it except for when I had assignments. But I remember myself as a child just standing off and observing, people,
Yes.
and then writing about it and, keeping it hidden. Because I didn't have the model of you share your poem, you could be a poet. I had no idea I was going to be a poet.
Right. So are you working on anything new right now?
I'm always working on something new. I'm working on actually two big collections.
Right.
One is my father died 3 years ago, and so I'm working on a collection of poems which is entitled The Scent of My Father. And trying to discover things that I didn't know about my father, because my father didn't always share openly.
Right.
Some of it are from letters I have from him. Some of it is from talking to my cousins and older people, that I learned very late that my father was a cyclist. I knew he and my mother used to ride, but I didn't know that he was a cyclist and he entered races and he won trophies.
Okay.
I just learned not too long ago, my father during World War I was in the Jamaica and was sent with many other people from Jamaica and the Caribbean by the British
Right.
to fight, and they were promised education. And then because they were black, the British government reneged
Turned it
on
back,
giving
yeah.
them education. And my father was preparing to come home. And his mother, my grandmother, said, hell no, they promised you an education and you're not coming home without a college education. And so she had been a housewife for many years, and she went back out to work to help to send him money. And so my father earned a degree in chemistry and city planning. So there are just a lot of things I didn't know about my father, some of which I never will.
Right.
And so I'm trying to dream him, so to speak. But this is one of the collections I'm working on. The other collection I'm working on is called Still Standing, Haiti. And it is a collection of poems and stories specifically about Haiti. And I've gone in the last since the earthquake in 2011, I went and I interviewed women in the various camps around Port-au-Prince
Right.
and in Jacmel. And initially I was just kind of doing it, and then I say I have a book here, and I've also photographed them extensively. So I'm writing a book based on the interviews I've got collected, and I've gone back 3 times last year, and then I'm going to go back one more time this year. So based on the interviews I've collected from mostly women and from the pictures I've taken, I'm putting a book together which is to honor Haiti, but also to establish 50% of the proceeds will be to establish a literature writing program in one of the communities in Haiti.
Okay. So you read a couple poems,
Uh-huh.
and so the book you're reading from is one of your books.
Right. The poem I read from is from, let me show it, because you have self-promotion. It's kind of there, not there. It's called I Name Me Name, and it's a collection of poems and essays and stories that I wrote. It was published by a press in England, People Tree Press, in 2008, and it was the first time in my poetry that I was really kind of pinpointing what it meant to be a colonial subject, because when I was growing up, Jamaica wasn't independent yet.
Right.
And even though we're independent, neo-colonialism is still very much a factor of our lives. So I was looking at that and also just paying tribute to mostly my mother and the other women who have influenced me as a result of the history that I know. Like Mary Prince is one of the few slave narratives from the Caribbean that's published, and she worked in the salt mines in Antigua and other places like that. So there's a poem there for her. Mary Seacole was a Jamaican woman who was free. She was what we called back then a mulatto or a biracial woman, but definitely identified and looked black, and who was a nurse and a healer because her mother was what we might call a obia woman, and then she trained to be a nurse, and who went to the Crimson, and who did as much work as Joan of Arc. But we know of Joan of Arc, and we don't know of Mary Seacole. Phenomenal story. So I pay tribute to her. So this book is I pay tribute to Phyllis Wheatley, the black woman who was a slave in the USA, who was captured from Africa when she was 8, and who was taken in by a benevolent owner, and so she was taught to read and write and became the second woman in the USA to be published. I mean, incredible stuff, and we don't know about that because we spend so little time searching out our history. So I pay tribute to her. But I also pay tribute to some amazing men like Nat Turner. There's a poem in here that I pay tribute to Nat Turner. Again, people know of Nat Turner, but they don't know that when he was captured, his capturer had the right to his body, and he peeled his skin and made a purse and a lampshade. A purse for his wife and a lampshade for his house. Horrific stuff, So this collection is paying tribute to those people whose backs and shoulders I stand on without even knowing what they did. Both personal lineage, family members, and other people in my community, and then just people in history who have paved the way for me so that I am here. I'm always grateful that I'm here, and I'm always grateful for the life of privilege I live. It doesn't mean that I have 2 pennies in the bank, but I still realize that I live a life of privilege because a lot of people made sacrifices for me, and that in many ways I have a good life and an easy life because of the sacrifices that uncountable people made for me, both men and women. And I think sometimes as black people we tend to take that for granted.
Yes.
That, where we are now is quite different from where our people were 200 years ago, and what that must have meant to be enslaved, to be in bondage, and to be free in your mind. Because if you weren't free in your mind, you would never have gotten free. And regardless of what they say to us, it's true that some white folks or whatever helped, but it was our own drive and force and determination to be free that made us free, you see? And we tend to forget that, I think. We tend to complain a lot. We tend to think there's lots of things we can't do as a result of that. And so I am mindful of that. I've taught my children that, and I teach children that, and I want us to always remember and how much more we can do because of, when I think of, just think about St. Croix, and just think that St. Croix's economy is based on the sugar plantation, and we know what sugar and cane is. We know that it ain't no easy job. We know the sharpness of cane, and that they withstood that and got free and got educated and got land, and have gotten all of these things that we now have and we take for granted. We need to bow down. We need to put signs at these various plantations and say thank you for the nameless ancestors who sacrificed for us so that we're here.
Yes.
We really need to do that.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite poet, Opal?
Oh gosh, there's so many poets I love. I would have to say Kamau Brathwaite is one of my favorite poets. He's from Barbados. He spent many years in Jamaica. About 50 years. He was married to a Jamaican. He taught at the University of the West Indies. And I am very happy to say he was a mentor for me. He really encouraged me when I just started in my late more like in my 20s actually. He really encouraged me and looked at my work and published my work, and so he's one of my favorite poets. And I think he's also one of my favorite poets because he's one of these poets who also looked to Africa. He went to Kenya. He taught in Kenya. Much of his work has to deal with connecting the past and the present. He's a trained historian, so he's certainly one of my favorite poets. And then Pablo Neruda is also one of my favorite poets from Chile, but he was a fighter, you know, fighting against oppression. He was jailed. So in terms of women, Louise Bennett is a formidable poet whose poems I recite and who I respect, a Jamaican poet, and who I think gave me permission to write some of my poems in Jamaican nation language or dialect.
Right.
So big kudos to her and to Lucille Clifton, who's an African American poet, you know, who just really showed me about craft and writing your truth and not being afraid to say what you believe and know to be your truth and just putting it out there. So these are certainly some of my 4 top poets, but there are just a lot of other poets and writers who have influenced me and whose work I like.
Okay.
What do you share with an up and coming poet? You know, someone that wants to get into it. What do you tell them?
Well, I tell them what I was told and what I still believe is the truth, is that you have to just do it. You have to write. If you want to be a poet, you have to study the craft, and I don't necessarily mean school. School can help, but you don't have to necessarily go to school, and you have to discipline yourself to write, and not just to write it and think, you know, there are a number of, I think, young poets these days who write it the first time and think it's okay. You know, I just wrote it on the subway and it's good, or I just wrote it on the bus. I think some of that is good, but most of it isn't.
Okay.
And I think if you want your poems to last, I want my poems to last. That is not just now, but 100 years from now, somebody will pick them up and will still be able to see and hear the merit of my poetry. That takes practice, like anything else.
Right.
It's like a runner. It's like, what's our basketball player?
Tim Duncan.
Duncan. That takes practice. You know, he didn't just get up and become Duncan. He had to practice. Our runners, our doctors, anybody who is good at anything they do, it is something they do religiously all the time. They practice, they sharpen their skills. So if you want to write, if you want to be a poet, then you have to learn the craft before you break the rules. And that's why I'm beginning and I'm launching by this year my children's journal, IAIA, which tagline is Growing Young Writers. Because while the Caribbean has produced a lot of good writers, we don't have a journal for children, and we need a journal where our children can begin to see. Because I didn't have that at 10.
Right.
You know, at 13 I had it, but that was just one time. It was just a thing that came out. I want our children to know at 7 and 8, at 9 and 10, that they can be writers, that this can be their future, and they can see their work being published in a book or on the internet. And so that for me is really important, that's one of the contributions that I want to make as a writer. Because when I've gone to some of these schools and these kids don't know any of the poets. You know, Marvin Williams was an amazing Crucian poet, and they don't know him or his work, you know, and they should. And then there are other wonderful poets here, and they should know them. And if they begin to see themselves as poets, then they will begin to seek out the other poets who have shaped them or who will shape them. Yeah.
The book that you have here, is that your first book?
No, this is not my first book. I don't even know where my first book is. My first book, I went to California to study, to get a master's degree in creative writing, and I ran into a group that was called Poets for the People. And they said to me, you don't have a book? And I said, no. And they said, well, we want to produce your poem. So my first book is called Market Woman. And because that was a very popular poem of mine, a tribute to market women, primarily from Jamaica. And it was published in 1980, I think, in San Francisco Bay Area. And I think I still have one or so copies. But so that was my first book. And you know, as I look at it, I still value it, but I could see that I was just a baby in arms coming up, trying to figure it out, and got some of it right and didn't get some of it right. And I think this is true in whatever number of books you write. You get certain things right and you don't get certain things right. It's always a process, you know. We always think of the end result. I think the end result is when you're dead. So that I don't, while I consider myself a master poet, I still don't feel I can write a poem and the first time it's good. I have to go back and I have to shape it and I have to edit it and I've got to look at the word choice and the line break and the language. So it's a process.
Right.
It's a process, yes.
Is it hard to get a book of poems published?
Well, it depends on which route you want to go. Self-publishing has made it much easier. And while I advocate self-publishing, there are lots of terrible books that are self-published, but there are also a lot of good books. To get a book published by, in quotes, a reputable publisher is still somewhat difficult. Poetry doesn't make money, so I think I have, 4 or 5? I think I have 5 books of poems, and, you know, I haven't really made any money to pay my rent or anything like that. But what it has done for me by having these books, I have been invited to various places.
Okay.
I've been invited to various places, and that has helped me. So, for instance, when I went, the first time I went to Africa, West Africa, was in 85. I don't think I had a full collection then, but I didn't have a visa. I'm going to tell you this little story. I didn't have a visa. I went to, where was I? I was in Nairobi, right, and I wanted to go to Tanzania because Julius Nyerere was one of my heroes from, you know, coming up. And I didn't have a visa, but anyway, I got in a car, and people in Africa were just wonderful and welcoming and thought I was them, which I was, kind of stuff. But anyway, I get to the border. Before I left Nairobi, my friend worked at a TV station, so they had me on the TV reading some of my poets, talking about this Jamaican writer visiting.
Right.
I go to the border between Kenya and Tanzania, and I don't have a visa. And this is how I say poetry saved my life. The guard saw the TV program the night before and says, "Go, man, you can just go."
Yes, I.
You know, and people were just so wonderful and welcoming whenever I introduced myself from Jamaica because of the Rastafarians and all of that stuff, but also because I was a writer, because for them the word was sacred, and I was able to take their stories and share my stories. So I always say, and I was so protected by people who didn't speak the language. As I was driving, you know, it's like 6-8 hours from Kenya in this car loaded with people, and there was this guy, African guy there, who spoke English, and he just took me under his wings, and I didn't know where I was staying because I couldn't make contacts with some people, and he said, you know, he'll take me to a hotel and we could stay there, but very trustworthy, no exploitation or sexual innuendos, just honest. And I just have to say that I felt so cared for by both men and women on my trip. On all my trips, actually, to East and West Africa, to Egypt, people were just enormously wonderful. In Kenya last year at a poetry festival, people were just, you know, big hearts, generous. So yes. So yeah, poetry doesn't make you money, but it's still, I think, one of the important art form that needs to be done and practiced and developed, and I think in time it can and it will.
Well, what message you have here for the Virgin Islands, especially here in St. Croix, in getting this recognized here in the territory? Yes,
I have done a few workshops in a few schools in Central, in Pearl Larson, in a couple schools, and the kids are bright and they want to write and they have a lot of ideas that they want to express. And I think schools now have become too driven by tests and test results, and there's not enough space for children to express themselves. not enough space for children to learn about their culture and the Virgin Islands. And so whenever I teach poetry here, and certainly my aim at teaching poetry here or doing a journal for children in the Caribbean, is so that we will learn to appreciate who and what we are, because I think a lot of times we don't. Kids don't know the fruits. They're not drinking coconut water. They think it's better to go to the store and buy some
Sprite.
syrup and colored dye, which is not good for them. They don't eat the sapodillias. They don't eat all of the fruits that are here, but they'll go and buy an apple. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but so much of our fruits are nutritious and good for the body. The mangoes, the guavas, the sweet sops. And they don't know them,
Yes.
which is also alarming to me. Somehow we're not teaching them about the local fruits and faunas. They don't know the names of the trees. They don't know the names of the plant. They don't know that, I'm blanking on the name, that's good if you have pain in your joints. They don't know those things, and those things are important, and we need to teach them that. So oftentimes when I do a poetry curriculum, it is engaging kids in learning about their environment and their family, and bringing something. What do you want to celebrate about St. Croix where you live, or St. Thomas where you live, or Jamaica or Cuba or wherever. It's about teaching us to appreciate us, so we're not looking outward, that we're looking inward and beginning to see what we have here and how what we have here can benefit us.
The other thing I wanted to sort of switch gears here a little bit and talk is Moving Women Theater Ensemble. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so I have many projects, and I'm fundraising, for all of them because they take money. So I've already mentioned my IAIA, which is a journal that I will launch, that I'm getting ready to launch for children throughout the Caribbean. And I guess the largest contributor will be the Virgin Islands, because that's where I am and that's where the children are. Moving Women Ensemble Theatre is a company I started 6 years ago. It's conscious theatre. So all of the shows that have been done, I have written and produced and directed, and they all have to do with a local issue. So last year, the show that I did was called Out of Control, and it looked at domestic violence, which is a big problem in St. Croix.
Yes.
And I interviewed people from the Women's Coalition, from the Men's Coalition, from DVSAC. And then I interviewed, I think, mostly women who were victims of domestic violence, and then I wrote a show. And I just want to say that one of the characters in the show was a man, because men are sometimes victim of domestic abuse, but because they're male and the shame around saying, that their woman beat upon them or whatever. But that is also a reality. And so the show deals with that, although the emphasis was on women, and because the largest percentage of domestic violence impacts women and children. This year I'm fundraising for a play on child abuse, both physical as well as sexual abuse. A couple years ago, I forget what national organization did a survey on child abuse in the Caribbean, and the statistics were alarming. It's actually quite alarming. So again, my approach is I interview people who have been victims of child abuse and who are survivors, and then I write a play. So I've written a play that's called I Am Not Lying, Let's End the Secrets. And for me, social theater is important. It's not that comedies and all of this other stuff isn't important. I'm about healing. I feel that my poetry and my work is about healing us. And as a people, we have a lot of stuff to heal from.
Right.
We are in so much pain, we're not even aware of it. That's why we sometimes just be cussing and fighting each other, and we don't even know why we're cussing and fighting each other.
Yes.
We don't know.
Yes.
We're in pain, and we haven't stopped to heal our pain. So for me, theater is about allowing me to help the community to look at, this is an issue for us. How do we go about solving it? Let us begin to talk about it. And when you give them a play, it's easier for them to begin to address these issues than if you just come to them one-on-one and you're just talking about child abuse and all of that kind of stuff. You give them a little scenario. People feel a little relaxed, then they're more open to say, well, this happened to me, or my mother or my father beat me so bad. I did a poetry exercise with some kids at the university when I was teaching there, and every one of them, there were 12 kids in the class, 12 young people, they weren't kids, in the class, and every one of them, both girls as well as boys, recounted a physical abuse by a parent for something that they didn't necessarily do, or they were misunderstood or misrepresented. So it's very prevalent. My thing is that I think the violence, to me, I'm not surprised at the violence. The Caribbean is a result of violence. Slavery was a very violent thing. We were beaten, we were chained. We had to take it. Right? If we didn't take it, we were killed, literally, not just figuratively. So we have internalized some of that physical and mental abuse, being told we were ugly, our lips too thick, our skin too black, all of that negative things for 400 years, we have internalized and we haven't worked them out. So for me, theater, poetry, the arts is a way of working some of these issues out so that we can become well. Because until we become well, we can't soar. We've done great things, but the things we can do, we just don't even begin to understand, because we're hustling. We're constantly trying to get over. We're constantly trying to make a living. We're constantly trying to put a band-aid on pain that is old and long and crusted over and need to be healed and massaged and acknowledged. So
so you did a stage play some time back.
Mm-hmm.
So the public was accepting of what you were trying to do?
You know what? It was last year, the play Out of Control was the most successful play I had done, in terms of we had an almost sold out audience.
Where did you do that at?
It was done at the Savage Theatre in Frederiksted, and
that's the old Good Hope School.
Yes.
Okay.
And it was really well received, and as a result of doing it there, DVSAC raised a little money to help us to go to St. Thomas. Now, it didn't quite work out as successful in St. Thomas, but the people, in fact, just the other day, somebody emailed me on Facebook and said, I saw the play when I was in St. Thomas, and let me know what else you're doing. So I felt that the community was very receptive to the play,
Right.
that it was a kind of a relief that we were broaching the subject, not blaming, but saying it exists.
Yes, right.
What can we do to fix it? What can we do to heal the men, to heal the women, to heal the children, to fix it? So this year, I'm hoping to raise enough funds to do this play, I'm Not Lying, No More Secrets, about child abuse, and to do it probably in Frederiksted, either at Dorsch or Savage, or maybe even to do it here, depending on the funds that I generate and those kinds of things. So if people are interested, hit me up on Facebook. We have a Facebook page, Moving Women. We are a non-profit company that's registered through the St. Croix Foundation. So you can contribute to Moving Women through the St. Croix Foundation and get a tax deduction. So please do that and help us to continue this important work.
So child abuse obviously is a big thing here.
It's a big thing everywhere.
Yeah. Everywhere.
And in fact, it's gotten to be, worse in the US and Europe because of this child trafficking. The literally kidnapping and selling of primarily young
Youths,
girls
right.
for a sex market. It's unbelievable. The work that needs to be done is unbelievable. But yeah, it's a big thing here. What percentage, I don't know, but I know that it happens enough and people don't want to talk about it.
Talk about it, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What other stuff you have going on there?
Oh, we could be here forever. But I wanna read a poem. It's called Sisters Behind Bar, and this was a poem. I did a group of workshops in California about 8 years ago at the women's prison in Dublin, And I was asked to do it, and because many of the women there were actually Caribbean women, and I was kind of surprised. And many of the women have children, and they haven't, several women were like, please contact my children. I haven't seen them for 5 years. Anyway, so that's the next work I wanted to do. In fact, I did call to say I wanted to work in the prisons here because a friend of mine in California, Odisa Jones, has done extensive work with women and men in prison and has actually put on theatrical productions with prisoners. And I want to do the same thing here. And actually when I started to write the play on child abuse, I did call the prison system because I wanted to give people, everybody, to me it's important that even if I don't like what they're saying, I wanted to hear what they're saying. So I actually wanted to interview some men who were accused of child molestation. I wanted to hear what was their story, what were they thinking, what is it? Because we need to know. Anyway, I didn't get permission. They said they couldn't allow me to do that. But that's a work that I feel is also important, and I'm hoping that I'll have permission to do that, and that my next play in 2017 will somehow be about people incarcerated, men as well as women. I'm particularly interested in these young boys, 17, 18, 19, 20, who are killing each other and just being whatever they're being. Anyway, Sisters Behind Bar for the women in FCI in Dublin. Sister, I call you, who could be the woman next door. I shout to look out for my children while I run to the store. You should be the one I call howdy to as I work in my garden or sweep the garbage that people litter in front of my gate. Sister, it's you I've been missing, the friendly face that greets me when I arrive at work or holds the door for me open. It is your story I haven't heard, your sweet pot I haven't tasted. Sister, it's you I've been missing in the lunchroom when we relax and shout out, girl, I hear you. It's you I've been looking for in the church pew sitting beside me, on the dance floor to give a high five as you bump me. Sister, your children are being shuffled from foster home to relatives, seeking you and not finding comfort, crying at nights. During the day, their eyes a hunger food will never satisfy. Sister, locked up, working for $1 a day without benefits or retirement plan, I will not allow you to be forgotten. I will carry you in my words for your children, for your parents, for yourself. And so this will bring another story, which I'm not going to get into, but I just have to say that the penal system is very corrupt. Yeah, there are people who are there and they belong there, and there are people who are there who don't belong there because of all kinds of circumstances, poverty, abuse. A lot of the women that I interviewed and a lot of the men who are in prison were abused, both physically or sexually. Right. And that's another thing about sexual abuse. A lot of boys will not admit to it, again because of the shame, but I have had 4 students who have admitted to being raped by either an older cousin, an uncle, a man in the village, okay? So it exists across gender. Yes. And people, as a result, because they don't get therapy, because they have no way to deal with it, because they feel it's their fault, they commit crimes. I'm not making excuses for them committing crimes, but I'm also saying that we have to rehabilitate people and understand the circumstances that led them there and not exploit them. Mm-hmm. And the penal system, certainly in the USA, I don't know much about the penal system here, is very exploitive in that it has people incarcerated, semi-slaves, working, making a lot of products that is benefiting the community, and they're not being paid. So that's as much as I'm going to say on that topic right now. You can tell that I have a lot of things on my mind. But I wanted to read that for the women who are incarcerated and for the women who are incarcerated both physically as well as emotionally and spiritually as we move into International Women's Day. Mm-hmm. So.
One of the things I have here as your title is a cultural activist. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You want to touch on that a little bit?
Well, that's what I just did. Okay. Cultural activist. I mean, to me, as a cultural activist, my mother always volunteered in the community, and we grew up on a sugar estate, and my mother was the assistant to the manager, and she started a credit union for the cane cutters and stuff like that. So she had us, my sister and I, volunteering from we were 12. I used to go to Red Cross, or we would go to the hospital with people who were poor and didn't have any relatives, and read to them and bring them little snacks that they needed to have. So my cultural activism comes from my mother. I have to really credit her for that. And that she always felt that if you had, then you shared what you have. You know, I think it was the Tanzania, or maybe it was Cuba, or it was both, that each one teach one.
Yes.
That motto, each one teach one. And so I have always felt inclined to each one teach one. So as a cultural activist, the work I do with the theater is cultural activism. The work I do in prisons is cultural activism. The work I do for this art show that I just did, which is at the Fort. People should go to the Frederick Said Fort for the Black History Show, which is a show that I've been doing for 4 years, all volunteer. I don't get paid for it. Nobody thanks me. Well, the artists thank me, but basically it's just a way for me to say, here is creativity. Here is a need. How can we fill this need? What can I do? What can I start? Who can I work with to fill this need? So that to me is what cultural activism is that you see something that culturally needs to happen that enhances your community. The Black History Show enhances the Virgin Islands. It brings artists together to focus on a theme, okay? The theater program enhances the Virgin Islands. It brings people out to deal with problematic subject and to share it with a larger community. So if this is some pain that they're holding on, they can let it out. And in fact, we had a question and answer after the play, and people shared, right? So cultural activism is each of us looking in our community and see what is the need. Who do I need to work with to make it happen? It can be big as well as can be small. And I believe I've been a cultural activist and will continue to be a cultural activist because I value culture. I value our culture, and I don't think we've been taught enough to appreciate it. And so I use the arts as a way to help us to look, to heal, to grow, to expand.
Okay. Give our viewers some insight into this art show you're talking about. You said it's just started and it's going on for a month, if I'm not mistaken?
Thank you. Yeah. It's called Ceremonies and Rituals, and it's at the Fort Frederick Museum in Frederickstead, and it's the 4th annual Black History Show that I've done. And it has amazing work by Leo Carte about fire burn and emancipation. And then it has some sculptures that the fort had auditioned to be done on the various headscarf that the women wear in quadrille. And then it has work by local artists, some of my own photography, of course, so I have to big up myself. It has work by Lucien Dawes. It has work by Charmaine, who is an amazing local artist who works with seashells. It has work by Danica David, Zulu Warrior, is the poster for the flyer. It has work by Christiane Malloy. It has work by David Berger, all local artists. It has work by, forgive me, I'm forgetting some names, KC, and Glenda. So, you know, there are about 10 artists whose work are featured that in some ways depicts rituals, and by Larry, who has a lot of black faces and masks. So the show is there, and it's a celebration of artists, local artists, who is doing work that, in my estimation, because I'm the curator, that give positive energy to our local culture and our people. And it will be there until April 1st. And the fort is open Monday through Friday from 9 to 4. So you can go. Most of the work is for sale. Buy the work and support the artists. I think the prices are reasonable. And that's also the way you do cultural activism. If you're not an artist, or you're not an actor, or you're not a poet, then you support people. You buy local books. There are lots of great writers. Buy their books, buy their paintings. You know, don't let it all be bought and sold away by other people. Put it in your house.
For National International Women's Day tomorrow, are you doing anything special tomorrow?
No, the only thing special I'm doing is celebrating me. No, actually, I have to go to DMV and register my car. No, that's not so special. But I want to big up, in fact, I had called her. My daughter lives in Paris and she's a Jamaican, no, Parisian kid. And she has done a song, which is one of the songs I like, Endangered Species. And I sing No Victim song. So she just did a little video, which she's going to be releasing tomorrow. And I'll send you the link, and maybe you will send the link. I had thought I would have had enough time to write a new poem and maybe do a video of it and put it up. But so far I haven't. If I get inspired and I write it tonight. I'll call you, David, and I'll come over here and I will do it, and then we'll put it up. But I am just celebrating women and celebrating life and just being grateful. I'm celebrating my mother, who is 87, my sister, who is helping to take care of her, and just celebrating all women, wherever you are, at whatever stage you are in life, just saying praise and blessing to you, and to just keep on stepping and to find people who support you, and to just leave off the pettiness. Let's just leave off the pettiness. There is work that we all need to do, and we just need to forge ahead and do it. So, thank you.
Well said.
Thank you.
All right. Our guest tonight is Opal Palmer Odisa.
Odisa.
Anything that we might have forgot to ask her that you want to share?
Let me close with one poem.
Yes.
Okay? And I hear something going off. This is called Four-Headed Woman.
What's wrong?
I think that's my phone, which I forgot to turn off. But I'm going to ignore it.
Okay.
I'm going to ignore it, and I'm going to read this. So I wrote this poem. I have 3 children, and I got divorced when my kids were fairly young. And I was teaching full-time. I was mothering, and I was doing all kinds of stuff. And I just felt a little crazy. And I felt like I needed 4 heads. And I think most women, this collection is a Four-Headed Woman, and it's published by Tia Chua Press, which is a small press in LA, and they do amazing work, and they're cultural activists, Luis Rodriguez. Anyway, I just know that for me at that time, I needed 4 heads. To be a mother, to be a teacher, to do my own writing, to be a lover and being in the world. So this is called Four-Headed Woman.
Right.
Somewhere in the midst of everything, buried under the garbage of roads, hiding among the rubbles of demand, is a headless life, probably my own. Has anyone seen or turned it into the lost and found department? Perhaps it was snatched and gagged by kidnappers holding out for ransom. Maybe a pickpocketer grabbed it, assuming value. Can do the mothering thing, but cannot do the wifing. Poems must be written. Who decides what's easier, what falls by the way? In my imaginings, me was always at the center. Activities swirled around me, not tornadic, not helter-skelter, clutching at the air. This is my life, after all. And so this was written during a period when I felt very much scattered and overwhelmed, and I needed a wife, I needed a chauffeur, I needed a babysitter, I needed all kinds of stuff. And I think many people, many women juggle all of those different roles, and so they have, we need 4 heads.
4 heads, yep.
Yeah. So
right.
Thank you very much.
Share your email, your telephone number if you have one, any of that kind of social media stuff.
Please hit me up on Facebook, Opal Palmer Odisa Writer. There are 2 things, so do Opal Palmer Odisa Writer because the other one is full. My website is www.opalmeradisa, so you can always contact me there. Moving Woman has a Facebook page, so contact me through Moving Woman on Facebook. And IA, the Junior Caribbean Writer, has a Facebook page, so contact me there too. And just continue to be present in your world and in the community. Big up St. Croix and the Virgin Islands and the Caribbean, and let each of us do our part. And if we do our part and we hold politicians accountable, then we can actually see progress taking place. And let's not celebrate 100 years of re-enslavement in terms of being sold from, we were free when we were sold from zones by the Danes to America. And as far as I know, we haven't gotten any repatriation. So the celebration should be around repatriation. You know, what did the Danes do with that money? It needs to be brought back to St. Croix. We need to build schools and hospitals, get programs, money to fund the arts. So all of those things. So please, Opal Palmer Odisa at .com, www.opalpalmerodisa.com, on Facebook, on social media. Thank you so much.
All right, all right. Opal is our guest tonight. Soup, any final words?
Thank you, Opal. Continue to blaze the trail. You're a spirit that can't be stopped, and don't let anybody stop you, no matter what they say. Whatever we could do to help you, we're going to be helping you along the way. One perfect love, Rastafari lives.
Yeah, and we like to say one perfect love is our prayers and his blessings. When you put it all together, you get one perfect love, man. So that's it for us tonight. It's about 9:27 p.m. on Monday, March 7, 2016. And if I could say real quick, this is the It's Your Perspective Talk Show. Our website is streaming live from the VI.com. We're in a high-tech, low-tech studio. Check out all our recorded live shows on our Ustream and YouTube website. Our channel is It's Your Perspective Talk Show. Big up the CHS class of 1982. We're moving straight forward and up. The show's mission is just to inform, entertain, and empower everyone. And on that note, we're out, man. So
I want to say something else too. I want to big up my mom. Yesterday was her birthday, her 74th birthday. Happy birthday, Mom. Love
happy
you.
birthday, Mom.
Happy birthday, Mom, for birthing this man.
Yes.
All right, so we'll leave it at that. We'll see you guys again hopefully tomorrow. On that note, we're out. Peace.
Financial shock. Once you have life, nothing should be no problem. Jaggy your life, you have strength, go solve them. Hands are not you have. I now go run from me yard. Talk about life, are just too financial.